So later on, she called me. Bale says, "I'm not on the stream tonight and forgot, am I?" I'm telling him, no, you're good. Yeah. Discord. He's put in the Tome Show Discord. All right. That will let you stream live. So you probably don't want to do that right now because it will conflict with your Skype streaming. Yeah. Right.
$15 years ago now. Sure, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's how it goes, right? Do I really have a choice? I do? Oh. You say that until you hear how horrible your audio is when you record it from Skype when you've streamed. Your microphone picks up every freaking creak of your chair. Yeah, I don't know if it will or not.
Wow, we're hearing some real stuff here.
Yeah, it's not a big enough deal for me to have ever mentioned it to him before. But if he's going to throw down, I'll throw down too, right? Ishmael says that he cannot hear you. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not muted. Well, it's good to figure these things out before. And now we should hear me.
Yes, I hear you.
On the stream or on the
No, on the stream too.
Okay.
I mean, we'll double check with Ishmael. I'm hosting it, so it's still on my screen.
I see.
Jeff, say something.
Say something? Something?
Okay, you did. Yeah. I can hear you on the stream as well.
Yeah, and the bars are bouncing now. I was just looking at that to make sure you guys weren't echoing, and then realized, oh, I'm not doing anything. I think it's because OBS just had an update that I installed literally 5 minutes before we started.
Oh, really?
So it lost one of my settings. So
that happens every time to me.
Yeah. Hopefully everything else is okay. All right. Should we actually get started now?
Probably.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I am recording. All right. This episode of the Tome is brought to you by listeners like you. Thanks for using our affiliate links to shop at Amazon and DM's Guild at thetomeshow.com, or for supporting us as patrons at patreon.com/thetome. Is that right? Or is it Tome Show? What is our Patreon? new script. Sorry, guys.
New script. Who dis?
Yeah. I got the window open right here. Let me double check and see what our
Let me see.
Patreon.com. The Tome Show.
Yes, the Tome Show. The Tome.
Let's try again. This episode of The Tome is brought to you by listeners like you. Thanks for using our affiliate links to shop at Amazon and DM's Guild at thetomeshow.com, or supporting us directly as patrons at patreon.com/thetomeshow. Welcome to the Tome Show's D&D fitness show. I never got official permission. Let me check right here. No.
Fit for D&D.
Yeah, welcome to the Tome Show's Fit for D&D show for... What month is this? It's been like 6 years since last month. April? It is April.
I've aged 5 years since starting to talk this evening.
It is February 2nd.
It is April of 2020. And here's the idea. This show is going to be a monthly check-in. It was inspired by the hashtag D&D Fitness that was started by Tall Squall on Twitter. And the idea is that Tracy and Sam and I are going to check in and talk about sort of how we're doing towards our fitness goals. And then for the second half of each episode, we're going to sort of dig into some topic, maybe an interview, whatever we decide to arrange for that month that we think might be helpful to us. So I mentioned that I am here with Tracy and Sam. So how you guys doing today?
Pretty good.
Doing well.
Nice. So people who are Tome Show familiar are probably aware of Tracy and Sam. They appear on many, many things, right?
Tracy.
Tracy's my co-host on many shows, and Sam is our fearless editor and co-host on Behind the DM Screen, as well as Edition Wars. And am I missing anything else?
Nope, I don't. I guest host or guest as a guest on lots of episodes.
Lots of episodes, yeah. And he has a separate gig on the D&D Brief podcast that is fantastic. I just listened to the latest episode today, so
Oh, we recorded an episode yesterday, and boy, was it juicy! It was
Yeah.
really good.
Did they
It was
finally?
really
Did they
good,
finally get
yeah.
to the duel?
No, actually, they avoid the duel, but there's a humongous battle, and then there is a final. This isn't behind the DM screen, but there is a final. There's a final sort of. I called that scene the intervention. That's going to be the name of the episode because they finally confront Marcel about their necklace that they've now realized definitely is cursed, and it comes along right after that with a great D&D brief portion of the show. So
Sweet.
I'm really looking forward to releasing that one. It's
that'll
gonna
be fun.
good.
And honestly, I don't know that I care too much about whether or not we go on tangents, right? This is the whole point of this is that we are talking fitness, but we're talking fitness for geeks, so it's okay for us to geek out on whatever we're geeking out on. Are you both okay with that? I mean, this is we're kind of making the show up as we go. So
what the thing I said in our Discord was it's fit for D&D is not just fitness physical, it's mental as well.
Right.
And I'm okay with going off on tangents, but I definitely do want to get the fitness, the physical fitness part in there too.
Yeah,
because I think it's important, especially in this time of quarantine.
And I do miss the podcasts I used to be on where it was a lot of conversation, including with Sam.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was. Are you referring to back in the 4E days?
Yeah, and there's 2 options, and I think I'm referring to both of them.
Both of them, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we had 4 Geeks 4E, and we had the round table, the original round table.
Yeah, y'all used to do a lot of stuff together. I didn't even think about I talk to both of you so often. It doesn't occur to me that the two of you don't see each other very often. So,
I mean, there was probably a span there of 2 or 3 years where we talked at least every other week, if not every week.
Wow.
Yeah. For hours.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
Some of those round tables were just so long.
Oh, I know. Sometimes they went on for hours. Oh, nice. Man. Anyway.
So should we get into it for our conversation today and figure out what we're gonna where we're gonna be, right? All this to say, we don't know what the sort of rules of the show are going to be. We don't know what the format exactly is going to be. We have some ideas about how to get started, but it's all sort of an evolution and whatever. And I'm taking the lead at this point because I've got the not quite a script, sort of template I'm calling it, in front of me to help me stay on track. But I it's our show, so I don't want to just sort of dictate. This is what it'll be like, right? So.
Yeah.
All right. So this episode we don't have a guest. I think in future episodes we hopefully will be able to have some guests. I already had at least 2 people kind of volunteer to come on, and I haven't even started looking for people yet. But I know several people who have been involved in some geeky fitness stuff and would be interested in joining in. My wife even recommended somebody, and she's like, "Oh, I know this person. She does this fitness podcast I listen to. She's always interested in going on things and talking about her books and whatever. And she's done a bunch of voiceover work for geeky sort of cartoons and stuff. She might be willing to come and talk to you someday." So I'm like, I don't know who that person is, but I'll certainly send an email, right? So that'd be cool.
Yeah.
So nice. So I thought I think the format idea that we've kind of talked about is that each month the 3 of us will sort of check in. How are we doing towards our goals and how are we feeling and all that kind of stuff, right? Just do a first check-in sort of for the first, I don't know, half or third or so of the episode, and then have some sort of segment for the back half or 2/3 or whatever it ends up being. That whatever might be sort of helpful to us at that point. So that's sort of what we talked about, how this is going to work. But this is our first episode, and so rather than bringing in a guest for the first episode or doing something off the instead of jumping right into the format, I guess, we thought it would be nice to spend the first episode like getting to know who we are and talking about sort of our history with fitness and talking about our goals and what we're doing towards those goals and what have you. So I think that's what we're going to do today, and I don't know how long it'll take. It might turn into a little bit of fitness therapy as we just talk through, our past and our history and see where it goes. Or it might be, each of us talks for a couple of minutes and we're done. I guess we'll just sort of see where it goes and
Wait.
what people want to share.
Have you met us?
A few times, yes.
Talk for a couple minutes?
Well, I don't want to assume that people are how comfortable people are going to be talking about, their history with fitness and whatever, right? It can be sensitive for some folks, so.
And then we probably should quickly talk about a couple of things. None of us are fitness experts or doctors or anything like that. I'm not overstating even with you, Sam, right? I know you have a science background, but...
Right, yeah. I am not a medical doctor. Right. Jeff is not a medical doctor.
I am a doctor, but not a medical doctor.
Yeah. As my mother puts it, a doctor, but not the kind that helps people.
Oh.
Not medically, but no,
right.
no. If you are having health issues or concerns, and before you start any workout program or any dietary change, please consult your doctor, especially if you have other known constraining factors or other known medical issues. My degrees are in biology, so I am a professor of biology and I teach anatomy and physiology. So I know a lot of the science, but I am definitely not a medical doctor. That's not what my training is. I'm not sure if people know it, but the training for a PhD is very, very different for the training from a medical perspective. Okay, so there are joint programs. I was not in one of those. Okay, I am not in any way, shape, or form a medical doctor, just like Jeff is not a medical doctor, even though he's a doctor, right? So, but yes, so please do not take our, it's that whole "I am not a lawyer" thing, right? I can give you advice thing, but I am not a lawyer. So,
right, yeah, no, absolutely, and who you consult or whatever, like that's all great. At the very least, don't consult us. We don't know what we're talking about, right? We're making it up.
We are giving you our own personal opinions and evaluations of anecdotal evidence that we have either experienced ourselves or gotten from talking to people or things that we've read in books. And so we'll give you the sources for those things and all that. But in no way is this meant to be construed as medical advice.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick was just, we already kind of mentioned that sometimes these things can be sensitive topics.
Right.
And I think part of the reason that I was hoping to have a podcast or have a place to be able to talk about this more is that I try to be very careful on my page. I usually don't talk about, for instance, anything in terms of pounds and stuff like that can often, but I feel like in this podcast, we should be able to talk about that. Is that okay too?
Yeah, that was my thought. And I think everybody should be able to talk about what they're comfortable talking about, right? So if one person's comfortable talking about their current weight and the other person isn't, then I think that's okay too.
Right, and our listeners should know that we might talk about those things.
Right.
Yeah, our intent is not to upset anyone or pressure anyone or make anybody feel like they're not doing something they should be or that they are doing something they shouldn't be or anything like that. That's not where we're going. We're just three geeks who have had. We realize over the years that we've all three had struggles with this, and so it might as well be something that we apply our podcasting expertise to.
And podcasting expertise, whatever, right? I think it's more about like we're holding ourselves accountable and using ourselves as motivation to improve ourselves. Yes. So at least that's what it is for me, right? And we figure if we have to, like, if people are expecting a monthly podcast, I'm going to have to talk about this. I should probably like get out there and do something that I can talk about, right? So I think that's part of what it is. And unfortunately, not everybody who wants to get in better shape or be healthy or whatever could probably do a podcast every month to encourage them to do that. But that's something we're going to do, and people can follow along in our journey and see how it goes. Does that all sound fair?
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. So I think it's time to talk about ourselves. To talk about, for each person to sort of talk a little bit about their history with fitness and sort of where they're at and where they'd like to be and what their goals are, and all of that. So is there anybody who wants to volunteer as tribute to be first? I mean, I'm happy to do it, but I don't want to dominate here. No? Should I?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay.
I don't have a preference on who goes first or last. It makes no difference.
I'll get started. So I am not a skinny person, I guess is a way to start it, right? I'm 6'4", and last time I weighed myself, and it's been a few days. A few days doesn't make a huge difference, right? I was about 300 and I think 3 or 4 pounds. So I've long been overweight. I've long been out of shape. People don't always realize how out of shape I am because I'm also tall, so it carries differently. And I think it got worse the last several years because of grad school, right? I had to stop going to the gym regularly and all that because I was too busy with coursework and dissertation and working a full-time job at the same time and all of that. And I always sort of told myself for decades, I told myself, look, I know I'm overweight. I know I'm out of shape. But I'm never going to let myself get over that 300-pound threshold. And then the last few years of grad school happened, and I did. In the last year or so, since I finished my PhD, I've been able to creep down a little bit. I was at like 310-ish, and I'm down to 303, 304 now, fairly consistently down, not just, I lost a little bit this week or whatever, right? I have some decent success in the past losing weight. I've done some, through my job, I did a couple of weight loss challenges, and I won literally like 3 years in a row to the point that I think everybody got sick of it and they just stopped doing them. And I did that by calorie counting, using Lose It. And I didn't necessarily... Lose It's an app where you can just sort of track what you eat and it sets a calorie budget for you and whatever. And I was pretty good about doing it. And then you get sick of it after about a month or two. But you kind of know what you can and can't eat at that point. So I was doing okay and able to hold on until the challenge was over. But if you're not tracking everything that you're eating every single meal, all day, every day... in my experience, it's about a month or so before I sort of lose the habit, right? Every now and then I'm like, I'm just going to splurge, and then you're splurging a little more, and then pretty soon you're not doing it at all, right? So I've had some success with that. I've also found, though, that when I lose weight, I don't feel better, but when I exercise, I do. And so that's been my experience. And so I've gone to the gym fairly regularly over the years. And I've mostly done strength stuff because it's not as boring as like cardio is, right? Cardio's always been boring to me. And so I've done more weightlifting routines and that kind of stuff and building up my strength. And I like feeling stronger. I don't know even then that I necessarily felt healthier, but I felt stronger, right? And I've been out of shape since... I was probably 5th, 6th grade, right? I was young when I was a skinny little kid. And then there was 1 year, I blame my dad. There was 1 year that he broke his knee, or his knee had surgery or whatever. And so he couldn't get out and get moving around. And he started this bad sort of tradition of having a bowl of ice cream every night. And I want to be just like Dad, so I had a bowl of ice cream every night. And I very quickly went from this little skinny kid to, now I'm overweight. I've got a bit of a belly, and, I just don't feel like doing all that physical activity stuff. And I sort of hung on to it through middle school. And then by high school, I wasn't doing a lot of, like, sports or whatever. I did tennis for 3 out of the 4 years of high school. I was always the slowest person on the tennis court, but I still did decently well because my skills were decent. Like I could aim the ball and make other people run while I was just sort of taking a few steps here and there. So I kept up okay in terms of, but I was never really much of an athlete. Yeah. I don't know. I think there was other stuff I was going to talk about in terms of my history, but I don't know. I guess
Do you
that's
want to say some goals, or
yeah.
in terms of your history, have there been times in the past where you've been really, really successful, or you've felt really successful at being healthier in whatever direction you wanted to be, but then you've let that slip?
Well, I sort of talked about the weight loss pieces where it would occasionally pop, and even when the challenges or whatever the contests were over, I would still occasionally pop on, lose it, and try to lose a little bit of weight, and I was usually pretty successful at it. But then it never sort of, again, you get sick of it after a couple of months, and then you're pretty good for another month, or at least I'm pretty good for about a month or so after that, and then I start splurging more and more, and I lose it. I lose what I lost from lose it. Yeah. New BDM is in the chat room, and he talks about how he and I were on Lose It at the same time at one point, and that's true. I remember because we were friends on there, and we could kind of watch each other and watch our progress. And I've done it off and on a few times, and I still go back to it every now and then. But yeah, no, the losing weight is nice. My clothes fit better or whatever, but I don't feel better. When I do the weight training, I feel stronger, which I like. And then just recently, just in the last, month or so, right? I can't go to the gym anymore because we're in the middle of the stay-at-home orders, and for anybody who's listening in the future or whatever, we're in the middle of all of that from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I can't go to the gym anymore. We have some weights, but not the kind of weight, not as heavy as I need to do my old weightlifting routine. But I had just started to add a little bit of running, and I'd done really small amounts of running before. It was never really my thing. Running was always really boring to me. I've even used some of like the Zombies Run apps and that kind of stuff, and that's kind of entertaining for a little while, and then it can't overcome how boring running is. So I've done that a little bit, but I started adding a little bit of running to my weightlifting routine because I realized there's a whole other element of health that I've been ignoring even as I've been going to the gym. Now that I can't go to the gym, I've just been doing the running, and I've once again been using the Zombies Run app. I've been specifically using the Zombies Run 5K app. It's specifically designed to sort of take you from a complete beginner who's never really been a runner before to being able to run a 5K in 8 weeks. And I've been really good about it. Like I was pretty good about doing some of that when I was going to the gym, but now that I can't go to the gym, I'm really on it. Like I'm doing it 3 days a week, like they recommend. I just started today. In fact, I just started week 7, so I'm less than 2 weeks away from finishing the program, and then I'm hoping to switch over to the regular Zombies Run app and keep going. And so far, 7 weeks in, I'm not bored yet. So that's huge, right? And I'm finding a few different places to run and whatever, but I'm still sticking mostly to the neighborhood. And maybe it's because of the stay-at-home orders, right? Because I'm so like cooped up all the time that just getting out of the house and running around the neighborhood for an hour it feels even more important for my mental health, let alone my physical health. But anyway, I think the running has done well in terms of helping me sort of feel healthier as well. I don't know that I've lost more than a few pounds since I've been doing it, but I feel I'm running further. It's easier. That first probably 4 weeks, my knees hurt literally every time I did it, and now my knees don't hurt most of the time when I'm running. So I feel like I'm getting healthier, even if I'm not getting stronger and I'm not losing a lot of weight. So. I think that's my history. My goals then, I think, are to keep up, right? In terms of what I concrete short-term goals want to do, I want to keep up this running program, find ways to make sure I don't get bored with it, and run at least 3 days a week, which is keeping up the program that I'm following, right? As 3 days a week going out and running. Long term, I'd like to lose a good 50 pounds or so, but I've had a goal to get to 250 for 10 years or so now, and it just seems like an unachievable goal at this point. So I think I need to focus in smaller increments than that. So does that cover me? Does anybody have questions?
What are you changing your diet at all, or are you just trying to exercise more
So,
and be more cognizant?
yeah, I'm not changing my diet significantly. Diet is tricky for me. I have, and this is worth mentioning, I was at one point diagnosed like pre-diabetic. You know, I wasn't quite getting to the point where the doctor was saying you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, but you know, if that number changes by 1 or 2, then I would be pre-diabetic and on my way to being diabetic. And I also have had, cholesterol in my testing or whatever. I've never had, I've always had a strong heart. My heart rate's always been good and all that. So, I've had recommendations for some how to deal with some of that, and I'm on medication for the blood sugar issue. But all of that has sort of at least the blood sugar has, since I've been cognizant of it and on the medication, it's not been a concern for several years now. The cholesterol's continued to be a concern, but it's not gone up either. And I struggle a little bit because my wife is having a decent amount of success doing a no carb, no sugar thing. And she's been doing it for a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And it's very impressive, but I do all the cooking in the house. And so I change what I cook to so she can eat, right? But that diet is also high fat, which doesn't help my trying to get the cholesterol thing down. I'm told that if you go with a full keto diet, it does actually address some of that, right? That kind of stuff does get better. I just don't know if I'm willing to go all that way. There are certain things I'm not sure I'm prepared to give up. So I try to be better at it and cognizant of it, but not huge changes in my diet other than that.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you how old you are?
I turned 40 last October. Yep. All right. Is that enough me unloading?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Do one of you want to volunteer to tell your story next?
Do you want to go, Sam?
You can go or I can go. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, we'll have you go last, I guess.
Okay.
I can start. So I think longtime listeners of the Tome Show would know that Jeff at one point posted a picture of me from high school. And I was, I think in that picture I probably was like 110, maybe at the very most, pounds. So I never had a problem with weight until I was around 18-ish. And then since then, I've just been slowly adding on pounds. And a lot of it is probably, now that doctors know more, has to do with hormones and PCO, because originally in my 20s I was diagnosed with PCOS. People thought it was depression, but like the weight gain might be depression related, but a lot of this health stuff ends up being, they go down and look at an angle, see if that's what explains it, and if it's not what explains it, then they go to the next thing. Does that sound about right to other folks?
You might want to explain to the audience what PCOS is.
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't know.
Yeah, so PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is also often tied to insulin resistance. And other things. So it basically is like can be, for some folks, kind of like pre-diabetes, I guess, in a way, right? So your blood sugars potentially will go up. You'll gain weight because your body is producing more insulin. Insulin happens to be a hormone that helps you get blood glucose into cells and or put it into fat storage for later. So if you have a high level of insulin, depending, what some people think happens is you actually don't have to eat comparatively a ton of calories. You could be eating your normal calories that you're expected to eat and still put on weight because you have that hormone. And I want to check in just on the biology thing because that was my understanding.
Yeah, that's the basics are the basics
Yeah.
are insulin has a ton of effects actually, but that's those are the major ones. That whole the major interaction there is to get your blood glucose to a level that would be the normal level for a person's body. And
Right.
that's what insulin helps do.
Yeah. And so I actually happen to have known like some amount of it because my brother was diagnosed fairly early as type 1 diabetic, which type 1 diabetes is where your body can't produce insulin, and thus you have a lot of things with thirst and hunger, because basically there's a few mechanisms to get your cells the energy it needs, one of which is the insulin part. So your cells basically aren't getting a lot of energy for the most part if you don't have insulin. Go forward a few years, couple decades, my parents start getting diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I get the PCOS stuff. It just keeps going on from there because there aren't a lot of great treatments. There's some drugs. They often can cause further weight gain depending on which thing they put you on. And there just wasn't a lot known about it, and there's still possibly not a lot known. And there was a huge push to still say like the overall, and I know now we're starting to go into like this whole things we might talk about in the next episode thing, but just keep eating carbs and stuff like that, part of it that some folks might think may have actually been detrimental. So it's a very hard thing to go through, and add on top of it the fact that I'm not very good at remembering to take medications on time, which meant that the medications really weren't doing much for me. And what I've decided recently, sorry, I want to talk about one other thing first. So I got diagnosed with diabetes type 2 about a year before I found out that I was pregnant with my child. But my doctor didn't actually like give me a blood glucose monitor or let me know that the effect that high levels of blood glucose can have on a developing fetus, and also including some pretty horrific potential birth defects, and that the body, if it does during pregnancy, increases insulin resistance. So when we found out that I was pregnant, and we had been trying for a while, and it just finally happened, there was a sudden, I had to completely change my lifestyle and what I was doing. And this was back in 2015, early 2016. And part of the reason that I actually couldn't come on the Tome show as often is it can cause fatigue and everything. So I had to, at a time when I had the least amount of energy ever, radically change my diet to where I was eating fewer carbs, had to be conscious of total calories and stuff like that, because we had to keep, when my body was fighting against it the most, I had to keep my blood sugar tightly controlled and take insulin. And I have a fear of needles. So that was a wonderful, wonderful time. And then fast forward, I did end up losing about 40 pounds after the pregnancy was over and after maternity leave was over. But I gained a lot of it back because maintaining that lifestyle when you have a infant and then like not sleeping through the night yet kind of toddler is very difficult. And so back in January, I started feeling a little weird, started taking my blood sugar again, and I was in the 280s, which for folks that don't know, I don't know the full way to explain it, but the 180 number, which is on the scale that the US tends to use, is about when they say that your blood sugar is not being controlled. 300s and above get kind of scary. That's usually when they want to have some really bad, like really drastic interventions, potentially. So I decided at that point to change my diet, to start getting more exercise in, and to figure out, given that I have a really hard time remembering to take medications and a fear of needles, and most of the stuff they wanted to give me required a needle, how I might be able to do this without, through food and exercise, which is what they've told me all along in a way. They just couldn't tell me a magic recipe to make it work. So that's what I've been doing. My blood sugars have been more in the 130 to 140 range for the most part. So I'm doing great on that side. I was hoping, except for the whole pandemic thing, that by this time I'd go in, get my A1C checked, that it should be under a 7, which the 8 and above again is kind of like the uncontrolled. 7's about the good part of saying you at least have it under control, and then you just ratchet it down after that. So that's where I'm at. So my goals are really to make sure blood sugar doesn't get out of control again, which is lots of fun when, it feels a lot like pregnancy in some ways, because during pregnancy, a lot of times people are allowed to eat more food because you're actually expending more calories through the creation of a human life. But I couldn't do that because I had to keep my blood sugar control, everything else. So I'm back. Everyone else is like eating, sometimes eating their emotions. And that's totally okay, except that I can't really do that because I could be potentially hurting my health and setting myself up for a worse situation if I did happen to get sick. So I know that's very deep, and sorry if it's too heavy, but that's what's going on with me.
And that was 4 years ago that you were pregnant?
About, yeah.
He's about, yeah. Is he 4 now?
In July.
In July, okay.
So, yeah. But I was definitely pregnant 4 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why I wanted, and it's been hard because I had been to the point where I was, work has a working treadmill that you can actually has a desk and you can walk at it. So I was walking about an hour on that a day, and you can only go a mile or two. And then I was doing probably close to 45 minutes to an hour of elliptical every day. Or at least most days. But of course, that's all a lot harder when the gym is closed and then you're not going to work to that treadmill. So my activity level has gone down a little bit, but we are working. Fred, for his own reasons, had already been working with a personal trainer to help. So
Fred's your husband.
Yeah, my husband. So I've been working with him too. And I feel weird kind of talking about it because I think people often think, because most of the people that have personal trainers are incredibly rich people, and it's kind of seen as this luxury thing. But for me and him, it's a medical issue that we need to figure out how to work this in to our lifestyle and make those changes.
So how often do you meet with the trainer?
Right now it's once a week. And we did get some equipment, like the TRX and stuff like that, to help with it.
So you've been maintaining, sort of doing some things then, even during the shut-in?
Yeah, and so before I was getting about 10,000 steps a day, which I know is a totally arbitrary made-up number, but is a number. And I've probably gotten somewhere between half to 3/4 of that now. Mm-hmm. But it's not like I went to nothing, right? I'm still pretty active. I do have an almost 4-year-old that I have to constantly chase around. So there's that too.
And so, did you talk about your goals? Where are you hoping to be? What's your, at least short-term, long-term,
Yeah.
Where are you trying to get to?
So a lot of it's just the blood sugars, keeping them pretty steady to where they are now, and hopefully keep decreasing downwards. That's the main one. I have already, since the end of January, lost about 20 pounds. So it's having effects other than that. But one thing I'm concerned about concentrating on that part is, overall weight's important. It's a number that can go up and down, particularly as people hit plateaus and whatnot. So I don't want to feel discouraged. If my overall blood sugar numbers are still going the right way, that's great to me.
Okay. Good. So you've got that number that's really sort of the more important number for you, is that blood sugar number.
Right. Yeah.
Excellent. Sam, you have questions?
Feel free to not answer this, but can I ask how old you are?
I am 41.
So before we move on to Sam and let Sam tell his story, just so you know, I do now officially have permission from Tall Squall that if we want to call the show D&D Fitness, he said that's cool. Don't worry about co-opting it or whatever. So now that we've already introduced the show as fit for D&D, who knows? That's what we called it this episode, and by next month we might be calling it something else. it'll be a constant change. We told you this is evolving and changing, right? So.
Yeah.
All right.
Honestly, I'm not sure it matters. I mean, I
No,
feel like, yeah.
I don't know that it matters that much either. So, Sam, why don't you tell us your story?
Oh, my story. Well, so let me give you some biometrics first. I am 5'6", and I weigh about. Well, so I weighed myself yesterday, and I weighed 246. Which 246 probably sounds like a wonderful number to Jeff, who is what, 6'3"? Did you say
6'4"? Yeah.
6'4", yeah. Yeah, you're like 1.5 tall of me.
I say 240. That's been a goal of mine since high school. So.
Yeah, right. But I'm 5'6". My brother is 6'1". My dad was 6 foot tall, and my mom is 5'4", and my grandma was 4'9". So I got my mom's side of the height there. So I did not get the grow tall gene, but really that doesn't matter. I mean, the thing is that the thing isn't even really like how tall I am. It's how the weight sits on my frame. And when I hit about 250, I really, really start to feel uncomfortable. Not that I'm super comfortable now, but 250 is like one of those numbers that's aligned for me. And I was above it for a while. I've struggled with my weight basically my entire life. I was a super skinny kid, but as soon as I hit puberty, that was it. Mm-hmm. The hormones started going, and I started eating everything, and my family's not the most nutritious eaters. So growing up, everything was comfort food and, high carb. My brother and I were latchkey kids. So we would come home and we'd eat a big giant sugary bowl of cereal as our after school snack. And then we would sit and do homework, and then, we'd watch TV, or we'd, play on the computer in the later teen years and stuff like that. So we weren't super active. And I know myself, I'm very susceptible to habits. So, Jeff, you talking about your dad getting a bowl of ice cream, every night or whatever, that really speaks to me, not because my dad had a bowl of ice cream every night, but because if I get into a habit, one of my worst habits is eating if I'm watching TV. Mm-hmm. And when I went back to college, I quit watching TV altogether. And it was one of the best things I ever did, because it took that sitting and doing nothing time away. But now, of course, many, many years have passed since that. And now I do everything on a computer, and there's a lot of sitting time again. And even though I don't watch a ton of TV, I do watch a little bit of TV. And as soon as I notice myself getting into a pattern of like eating, that means that my brain says to me every time I sit down to watch a show, oh, you should be eating something. You should be eating a snack, right? Or when I used to commute a long way, when I lived in California, I was commuting a very long way. I would always be eating lunch in the car because it was the only time I had to eat. But then that meant that every time I sat in the car, my brain would be like, you should be eating something. And I'm very susceptible to that. I apparently have an addictive personality. But not in the good way that might sound like, right? Like I smoked for a long time, and I quit smoking, and I haven't smoked now in more than a decade. But Like I know that my brain is it's set to that habit, and humans are creatures of habit anyway. But for some of us in particular, when there's a habit that you form, it just really it's a deal, right? For me, it's just really triggering. And food is a triggering thing because I eat my feelings, like Tracy mentioned, and I eat when I'm bored. And sitting down watching TV really actually bores me a little bit, even if occasionally I watch a show that's interesting. It's really just my body sitting, and my brain relates that as bored equals food,
It's
right?
very passive, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very passive thing. So that's kind of I know that about myself. There was a time when I weighed a lot more than I weigh now, um, and I sort of sit between 240 250 most of the time if I'm not paying attention to anything and I'm just doing normal activity, whatever my normal day to day is. But the thing is that normally because I teach at college, okay, and I teach. My schedule is such that when I teach, for example, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm literally standing on my feet from about 9:30 in the morning until 7 p.m. at night because I stand up and move around when I teach, and I gesture and I draw things and I walk around to my students and help them, and it's very active, relatively speaking. I'm not just sitting on my butt, at a desk or something. And now all of a sudden I don't have that for the past month. And so my activity level has changed from my normal baseline, not even counting, planned exercise or anything, just my activity. I'm sitting now making videos for my students, but I'm sitting in a chair when I'm doing it, right? Or I'm, making assignments in a chair at a computer. And it's really, I can feel it because, in the fall of last year, I actually started using Lose It again. I kind of like Jeff, I have had an account with Lose It for a very long time, and I use it off and on. And when I start using it, it really works because it just the fact of making me think about what exactly how many calories is this thing I'm eating. It doesn't actually make me eat better. It just makes me pay attention to how much I'm eating, and I end up eating less, right? And so that's helpful to me. But so maybe it wasn't last fall, maybe it was the fall before, I lost about 30 pounds. And when I lost 30 pounds, when I lose weight, I do feel better. But then if I don't increase my activity, I hit a plateau, and it doesn't matter what I do, I start gaining the weight back. So I tried to start integrating some exercise in there, but then, just life and everything got in the way, and that those pounds started creeping back up. And I was I was creeping up, and I noticed my weight was creeping back up. And then, in February, I said, okay, I'm going to do something about this. And then we hit this huge pandemic issue. And now I'm sort of like, crap, now I've creeped even closer back up towards my 250 number that I really hate. And so I'm trying to sort of mentally adjust the way I'm thinking about things again and saying, okay, don't get into a bad pattern and don't get into a habit. And so hearing you guys talk about, how you're going to maybe do this podcast, and I said, oh, I want in because this will make me be accountable, because I also know with myself, along with doing that pattern thing, if I'm accountable, I tend to do a lot better, right? Especially if I'm accountable to friends and people I respect, because that makes me really think, oh man, I have to talk about this. Like I'm going to have to be honest about this thing I'm doing. Right. And so, what did I skip? I skipped a lot. There's a whole lot in there that I haven't said. I mean, I've had this issue my whole life, basically my whole adult life. So there have been, there was one time before I went to grad school, I went on a low carb diet, and I maintained that for 6 or 8 months, and I lost like 60 pounds, and I got down to I got under 200. I was at 198. My jean size got down to a freaking 38, 36, something like that. It was awesome, and I felt really good. But, then life happened, and it just, and that, it's one of those things, right? So as a biologist, here's what I tell my students. I say, okay, everybody wants to lose weight. You eat better and you work out. But you know what happens after you work out and you work really hard? You find yourself hungry, right? But now that you've lost weight, you actually can't eat as much because you don't need as much to maintain the body that you have, because you lost some of your body, but you're even hungrier because you worked out. You know why? Because you're a mammal. because that's how mammals work. When you expend energy, your body wants you to put that energy right back because it wants to be as efficient as possible. So, like that's an issue, and knowing that, right? So here's why I kind of bring that up. Knowing that stuff makes absolutely no difference to my behavior. Like I know a ton of biology, but none of that changes. I knew biology when I was a smoker too, and I knew how horrible it was. None of that changes when you have a behavioral pattern and a genetic makeup that causes certain circumstances to be true for your own life, right? And so my certain circumstances are I very easily put on weight. It's very hard for me to lose weight. I've tried a lot of different things, and I really just want to be healthy and feel better. The one thing that happens to me that's really, really important and that I use as a measure of how I know that I'm being healthier, I sleep much better if I'm working out and eating better. If I just do one of them, it doesn't necessarily lead to better sleep. But if I do both of them, yeah, I feel better. When I sleep, I'm more rested. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's not really about a number for me, although it is because I don't want to get above that 250. But it's not. I used to have goals like, oh, I want to get down to whatever. I want to do this. I don't really have. I've learned over time that that's not a goal that works for me as much. Like what the goal that I really need to have is, I have a number because it's measurable, but I need to get to that point where, okay, I need to my journey really starts when I hit the point where I sleep better, because then it's like, okay, now how do I keep this? Like, how do I keep the situation where I sleep better? And that's where and I know I need measurable numbers, but that's really what my goal right now.
Yeah, sleeping better
and
would be nice.
I'm 46 and a half. I'll be 47 in August.
I was going to ask. Since you asked everybody else. So.
Yeah.
So does that mean I'm the baby of the group? I think
yeah,
I'm the youngest.
You are. You're baby.
Okay.
Because I know that the older you get, your metabolism changes, your body changes. And so, like, a lot of this is metabolic and that's genetically related. But age plays a huge part in that, right? Like, I get... Like I used to always be like I'm a night owl. I just naturally stay up at night, and but I used to be able to do that, several nights in a row. I could stay up really late. I can't do that anymore, and that's age related. And things like losing just a couple of pounds is a lot harder now than it was even 10 years ago, right? Like it's tough. So I know there's an age related component there too.
So at the very least, what we've learned is that this is going to be a show about 3 middle-aged white geeks trying to get healthier, right? So
yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
We'll try to diversify experiences as we bring in people for interviews and things as we go along too. That certainly was not an intention of the show when we put it together. It was just Tracy and I were chatting about it because we were both talking about online about trying to get healthier, and then Sam's like, "Hey, yeah, I want to do this too." So here we are, right? So that was not an intentional decision so much as a confluence of events, right? Good. I noticed as I listened to everybody's story, there was this effort and levels of success with going low carb. Sam mentioned you lost a lot of weight with it. Tracy has had to start cutting carbs for her blood sugar and diabetes issue. I talked about having to change my diet mostly because my wife is low carb. And I'm curious, like, I know for myself, I don't know that I could go to the degree that my wife has gone, right? She does basically no carbs, no sugar, unless, it's her birthday. And then she'll have a, piece of cheesecake.
So no carb and no processed sugar.
No added sugar. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the thing is, so just as a warning, you can't go no carb. Like there are diets that will say go no carb. You can't go no carb.
No,
your brain, your neurons need glucose. They specifically need glucose. So you have to have some carbohydrate.
Yeah. So, but she gets she tries to get all of her carbs from the vegetables that she eats.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Yeah, fruits and vegetables are great sources of carbohydrates that are not.
But she's not having
processed.
She's not having bread. She's not having pasta. She's not having all that. And I think about that, and I'm like, well, there is a degree to which I could do some of that, but I don't think. I think, as somebody who likes to drink tea in the morning, I have to put sugar in my tea. I can't drink it otherwise. Maybe if I weaned myself off of the sugar, I would get used to it enough that I could. But I've tried it, and it's like, no, I can't do it. It's too bitter. And as the cook of the family, like once a week making pasta or whatever for the family is just too easy of a meal to put together. If I've only got 15 to 30 minutes to put a meal together, I know that's something I can do, right? The breads and stuff, like I like a biscuit every now and then with breakfast, but I could cut most of the breads. But I would have a hard time with the sugar in my tea and the pasta. But I have tried to reduce the amount of carbs, so hopefully that's helpful. Or added processed carbs. So
yeah, and one of the concepts that's going around with some of the stuff like keto is more talking about what the umbrella term is, like for all of them, and that's the low carb healthy fats most often is
right.
how it's put, or high fat, but not just any fats.
Right.
And part of the interesting thing about that is that low carb in that essence can be anywhere from 100 grams of carbs per day on down. Mm-hmm. So there's actually a wide array even within that. I noticed some folks I think I read somewhere recently that the average American diet's probably more like 250 carbs per day. Mm-hmm. We'll see. So that is like a reduction, but you don't have, in order to be quote unquote low carb, you don't have to necessarily go all the way down to like what Atkins or keto even says to do.
Yeah, no, my wife's theory behind the whole thing, and maybe someday I'll convince her to come on, but her theory behind the whole thing is if she has to take the time to count her carbs, she'll fall off the wagon and she won't do it. So she's just, no, I'm just going to cut it all. And that way that's easy to count. So
that's actually what I was going to say to you in response to your tea comment was, like, if that's your morning wake up pleasure or whatever, mm-hmm. then that's not the first thing you should go to in terms of thinking about what you should change. You know what I mean? Because I love coffee. I love the taste of coffee. Mm-hmm. I have a bitter palate, so I really love like strong black coffee. But I know that drinking so much coffee all the time, all day is bad for me. So what I've done is I started to I would allow myself one, like I have a 10-ounce like travel cup, right? I would allow myself 1 10-ounce cup, or maybe it's 12 ounces or something like that, and I would drink that like the whole morning. And then when it was empty, I had to refill it with water at least twice that day before I went home. Like I had to drink that much water at work, right? So, and then that would also stop me from, I'll just top up my cup with coffee that was made at the office or whatever, right? Like I made myself not do that. So I still got the pleasure of my coffee, but I adjusted it down of my own choice. It wasn't because somebody said I need to quit drinking coffee or whatever. Anyway, so then what I started doing was I like tea as well. So I thought, maybe I'll start switching to tea a few days a week, right? And so now I've gotten to where I don't even drink coffee every single day anymore, and I don't miss it because I've replaced it sort of with healthier options that are just as good. But like if that's your thing, that you need your tea in the morning and it needs to have sugar, then that's like the last place you should remove that thing, right? Because the biggest, easiest way to kill this for anybody, I think, is take away something that you feel like is a necessity. Like, well, forget it then. What's the point of living? Right. I could get hit by a truck walking down the street tomorrow, and I've given up the thing I love the most in the morning. Like that. I mean, I don't have that particular attitude, but it's a valid thought about life, right? Like, why would you remove the thing you enjoy the most about your 2 hours in the morning? Right.
Well, and the pasta thing is tricky for me too, because like I don't know that I really care about the pasta itself, but I like having that meal. And I know you have those replacements, right? Whenever I make pasta for the family, I always make one separate little pot for my wife using zucchini noodles, or I'll do mushroom caps or whatever. Thing is, I don't like zucchini or mushrooms, so I don't know what I could possibly replace it with that would work for me. So I need some sort of delivery to bring that sauce and cheese into my mouth, and pasta's the way we do it, right? So.
Yeah, and I mean, so I have this similar sort of problem, but pasta makes, even the whole wheat and others pasta, just makes my blood sugar go straight up. So what I've been doing lately is I found a recipe. You can use chickpeas with sauce on it. Actually tastes really good. I know it sounds weird.
Just like whole chickpeas?
Yeah. I did a bowl last week because I had some extra sauce left over, and I had zucchini and chickpeas available because they're a pantry staple.